Yeah, hello everyone. My name is Steffen Schacher. I'm working for GFT Technologies and I'm located in Singapore. And I'm also the global lead for UDPN. So, I have the pleasure today to have the first session after lunch, but I promise you something that will excite you. So, to understand the room a little bit better, I would like to separate the room in technology people and people from the background of business and regulation. So if you're from the technology side, could you please raise your hand? All right, quite a lot. And how about from business and from the regulation side? As well. Okay, I'll make one promise to the technology people. You will love this presentation because you will see a running system. And I will make another promise to the business and regulation people. We will make your life a little bit easier in the future. All right. Okay, so the title today, The Future of Financial Infrastructure with the world's first all-in-one sandbox for digital currencies. So what is behind there is actually a project that we call UDPN, Universal Digital Payments Network, that we have started to build 3 years ago, and which basically addresses the interoperability when it comes to digital currencies. So what is UDPN? So what you see today in the current world, we have SWIFT, obviously, being the connector, being the messaging backbone between different fiat accounts and commercial banks. And UDPN has a similar approach, but is geared and designed towards digital currencies. Digital currencies for multiple use cases, so everything what is related to retail CBDCs, hotel CBDCs, tokenized deposits, stablecoins, in any form of technology, private chain, public chain, but also non-DLT solutions. So it's really serving the challenge of interoperability. Connects different wallet structures and digital currency systems. So, but this is not the only differentiator from SWIFT. What we have as well, it's basically UDPN allows any kind of like commercial banks, financial service providers, e-commerce companies, all kinds of like businesses basically to connect to UDPN, initiate and receive payments. What you see over here is like the connection via business IT systems is possible, commercial banks can be connected, and also digital currency systems can be connected. So all of them runs on an infrastructure orchestra layer, which is the messaging backbone UDPN. Another form that comes to it is the programmability of money, of flows. Within the digital age of digital currency and digital money, we believe that is very, very important. Today, we are already supporting use cases or basically smart contracts in the area of CBDCs, stablecoins, very important also FX transactions. But what we are building is essentially a marketplace where in the form of smart contracts, you can build and execute almost any kind of use case that we don't even know about it today. So it's really future and scalable proofed. All right, so as mentioned before, we have started to build UDPN around 3 years ago. There was a lot of like technology going in, a lot of feedback from commercial banks. We have basically spent the last 6 to 9 months running proof of concepts with around 30 plus organizations from financial institutions. You see a couple of them behind on the slide, but there's many more over there that we are getting basically feedback, that we are getting interest, that we are getting knowledge that is happening today from not only a commercial perspective, but also from others, from consultancy companies, from regulators, from people who are initiating and receiving payments. So really vast set of knowledge was created, flowed into this POCs and has enhanced the systems and the connectivity on UDPN dramatically. Okay. So what you see here is basically how is digital currencies approached at the moment. You see a lot of like, central bank CBDC system, maybe a retail aspect, a wholesale aspect, and each of these connections represents basically a connections to a commercial bank. So as you can see, it gets highly complicated, and maybe one example I can give you, if you look at India itself, so India itself has a payment mechanism in the retail space, UPI, that is quite successful. And it's really easy for them to basically transfer and send money to quite a large number of countries. So right now I think they're supporting 15 or 16 countries where they're able to transact retail payments. But it becomes a nightmare for commercial banks to maintain, operate, and even make the connections better within all of these different countries and all of these different banks. And when you look in the digital currency space, what we will see in the future, and what we are all talking about today, it's there will be different forms of CBDCs coming out. There will be different forms of stable coins coming out. And maybe one day, a lot of not only financial institutions, but also different kind of businesses will have a stable coin and will have a mode of payments. So if you bring this to the next level, how UDPN is helping and solving that, as you can see in the orchestra layer in between, it gears with the inclusion of connecting in a very seamless and fast manner commercial banks with a so-called business node. This is an API gateway that connects current IT systems in the bank towards UDPN. On this one side, we have transaction nodes which can be connected to public chain, private chains, and centralized services. So almost each of these transaction nodes is connected to one specific currency systems. On the other side, you find it very easy also for commercial banks to launch a tokenized deposit on UDPN directly. That makes it also a lot easier. But UDPN itself, it's not the idea that there's a lot of like currency system launched on UDPN. We are seeing us more as an infrastructure layer who connects different forms of transaction node and digital currency systems. However, it's a form of like how you really scale and connect in a form of like addressing the challenge of interoperability in this environment. And that's what we believe it's a very groundbreaking factor as a next step in order to make digital currencies live. Okay, I'm very thrilled today to announce the world's first all-in-one sandbox for digital currencies. And I actually like to refer back to the last question that was asked in the session before lunch. It was basically, when do we see the first wholesale CBDC settlement systems live? And I heard anything from like 3 years, maybe 5 years, maybe a little bit longer. So I would like you to show today an infrastructure that is already working, and we have a live demo that we would like to present to you. So I'd like to invite my colleague Tim towards the stage. 1 second, yes, I'd like to emphasize on what is included in it. So we have 2 versions of it. The first version is for commercial banks, and the second one is for central banks. So if you see that, we have a couple of like use cases and approaches as a default mechanism. For commercial banks is distributed retail CBDC system, a tokenized deposit system, and also wholesale CBDC participation. So these are use cases which are extremely important for commercial banks. For central banks itself, it's a little bit different. Central banks, they need to collaborate with commercial banks. So the version that we are offering for central banks lets other entities connect to the sandbox environment and let's transact them with different wholesale CBDC system or country-specific digital currency system. So in the inner ring, you find the default modules or functionalities that are integrated, and on the outside part, you find add-ons, which we think is also very, very important, because having talked to a lot of like central banks and commercial banks for the last 1.5 years, the feedback that we are getting is very customized. So what we are doing here, having an all-in-one sandbox, which is highly customizable in terms of like use cases and what would you like to run on it. So on the outer part, you find different areas like we have deposit tokens, we have purpose-bound money, digital currency offline payment solution, stable coins, digital asset tokenization. Also other CBDCs which are connected. One of the examples is a company from Munich, G+D, which is already live on our UDPN network. So today you can already experience and transact their CBDC solution from Filia, but many others will follow. And as mentioned, from central bank perspectives and version, it's all about like creating the ecosystem within the country itself. So having created this all-in-one sandbox, we also understand there's 2 approaches. So first of all, we would like to enable financial institutions at a very low barrier of entry to come and test it out. On the other side, we also understand it needs to be highly customizable. So therefore, what we have created is basically a SaaS pricing model that you can onboard on a subscription basis, but it's not a SaaS solution. It's basically in your environment deployed solution according to your needs. So the flexibility and ease in terms of like contracting it, but then also the customization on the local needs that we are running. So again, what you find here is basically the core elements that the 2 versions have. And again, so the main difference between these two is on a central bank services, you can onboard a lot of like commercial banks within the country as well. All right. Now, without further ado, I would like to show you a little bit how the system looks like in real life. So it's a working infrastructure, it's connected, and today Tim, my colleague, will bring you this a little bit closer. Please go ahead, Tim.
Thanks, Steffen, and thanks everyone for joining after lunch. What I'm going to do is a demonstration here of a live system. And as Steffen says, this is a system that, based on the feedback that we've heard from commercial banks, from digital asset companies, from central banks, that they want their own system that they can control access to in their own infrastructure or hosted in their cloud that they can control. So this is a system that a bank or a central bank can have sit in their infrastructure and provide permissioned access to other banks or partners. So this is the login here. You can log in either as a central bank or a commercial bank. Once you log in, here's the dashboard where you can see all of the digital currency systems that are included in the Sandbox. So tokenized deposit system, retail CBDC systems, wholesale CBDC systems. Here's an example of a wholesale CBDC system. So this is looking at it from a central bank perspective. So as a central bank, you look at the balances, you look at commercial banks that you've onboarded onto your system. You can provide permissioned access to multiple commercial banks. And then here you can also see, as Steffen mentioned, we built in use cases. So in the initial version that we launched actually today, there are 3 use cases built in. This is an example of a PVP transfer, in this case using tokenized deposit. So we will every month build in additional use cases, and banks and central banks have the ability to actually build their own use cases in the Sandbox environment using the currency systems that we've integrated. All right, Steffen, let me hand it back to you.
Thank you, Tim. All right. So now you might be wondering, why are we doing this? So what the Sandbox will entail and construct is basically you get an experience. So we know today there's a lot of central banks, commercial banks, you already have done experiments. But how were these experiments executed? Is a proof of concept, is one very isolated system, it's maybe an island solution that you can't really scale up and build. So really with this UDPN Sandbox, we want to go the next level, the next layer. So it's all about experiencing all forms of types and digital currencies, understanding them, and also bringing them into the organization itself. It cannot be only this one department that is responsible for either DLT or digital money. It needs to be brought into the organization. So that's one fundamental thing that this Sandbox will provide. Additionally, it's also a learning effect. So what I was mentioning earlier, a lot of these approaches comes from like vision statements, white papers written, small proof of concepts, and then in. But what does it mean where people are actually learning from it? Where do they really understand it? So we have now a system which is already functioning and which shows you the flows, the processes that you have to think about, that you have to make your organization aware about it. These are already built in, and it's a lot easier for your organization to learn. And last but not least, one of the most important things, it's highly scalable in terms of like new use cases that you would like to onboard on that. We understand that requirements are very different. We understand there's a lot of customization that comes in of it, and we also know there's a lot of use cases we don't even know today that will come along with the form of digital currencies, smart contracts, and programmability. So that's all inside the Sandbox. And one of the things that I would like to mention as well, one specific developed mBridge-like cross-border payment. So what it does is basically each of the central banks will have their own CBDC smart contract under control. It's a system that runs 24/7, very important as well. It has the absolute major use case about like liquidity savings. This is what this system is about in terms of like settlement areas. So it's the benefits for commercial banks are just too huge to not be part of that actually. That's why we're having a lot of interest in it. So commercial banks will here understand what is behind there, how are these use cases flowing, and how is also the very important of like cross-border payments the market making with foreign exchange relevancy behind this. That's all inside this use case. And yeah, so this is basically what I wanted to tell you today. So I will be around today. You will find me either at the GFT booth or Tim and myself, we will be at the conference. If you have any more questions regarding this all-in-one sandbox, we are more than happy to answer it. And hopefully I could hold my promises, and some of the people from the business and regulation side would find it a little bit easier to experiment with the sandbox, and technology people would like to get their hands on and try it out. All right. Thank you very much.